he's going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
It's a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with a big nose and a perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
To Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people out there, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different. There are different species. There's lizard men. There's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to a milestone episode of Around the Galaxy. I'm Pete Fletzer, but you probably know that. If you're watching this live, you're a patron of Around the Galaxy. Thank you so much for being a patron. Thank you so much for supporting us every single month. We do what we can to bring you as much fun conversation as we can. We have, for those of you who are trying to figure the whole thing out, we now have, there's 4 shows, but 3 days a week. It's a bit confusing. On Thursdays, we drop either Around the Galaxy or Podcast of the Wheels. My good friend Nick Milkey is now part of the ATG Cast family officially. It's so great to be hanging out and working with him. On Saturdays, we give you the Disturbances in the Force show, where we do all the Star Wars news from the week in 5 minutes or less. And then on Mondays, we drop the live replay of the live show from Friday from Streaming Star Wars. It's a little bit confusing, but on Friday night, Nick and I hang out and talk about streaming Star Wars. And then on Monday, we give you anyway, long story short, thanks for being a part. Thanks for hanging out with us. 4 shows all here on ATG Cast. Well, I said at the top, this is a milestone episode for me. I'm on my 150th episode of Around the Galaxy, and they said it wouldn't last. So I'm super excited to be doing this show. I wanted to do something a little bit different, something a little bit special. And so I thought about a number of things that I had heard from you, my listeners. First of all, one of the things that you said you loved was the episode I did where I interviewed my dad. I talk about my dad, Randy, all the time on the show. I use him as sort of a watermark for the quote unquote average Star Wars fan. He's a big fan of Star Wars, got me into sci-fi, got me into horror. But he's not on Twitter 24 hours a day like I am. He's not getting into trouble in little Twitter battles. He's not doing that. He's a much smarter man than I am. That's you learn from your father. I clearly didn't learn, but he's with us tonight. And here's the thing. He's not my guest. I'm the guest. I did that on episode 75. Scotty J. Rowe interviewed me. But this time I'm turning the show over to him completely. So I'm not going to say anything else right now. I'm going to turn the show over right now to my dad, Randy. Hold on. Hello. How are you?
Did you say it's my show?
It's your show tonight.
From here on in?
No, not from here. Well, let's see how this goes. But I am your guest. You are the host of Around the Galaxy tonight.
Oh, I thought it was my show. I was going to tell you to get lost.
Well, I mean, hey, this could go in a way that people might prefer that. I really don't know.
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it.
How are you?
Hey, I'm fine. Hey, and congratulations on 150. Seriously, that is quite an accomplishment. Did you ever think in 2019 you would be doing your 150th show 4 years afterwards?
No, I did it for just sort of a hobby idea. I was on somebody else's show and I was like, I could do this. And it's gone. I can't even say how much better it's gone than I've actually expected it to. It's, literally I was playing around in social media at the time, and I just wanted to bring on some of the cool people I met on social media and some of the podcasts I like to listen to. And then I just was, able to leverage some of the connections that I had from my time at Star Wars Galaxy. And I've been able to get everybody from some of my favorite social media voices to, as you see in the opener, like Hal Hickel and Ash Crossan and just some really great people. And so it's honestly, if you told me I'd still be doing this, I'd have been surprised. Not as surprised as my wife probably, but certainly I would be surprised if you told me that.
Well, thank you. You just stole two of my questions. So I just rip those up, get rid of that. Now the show's only going to last about 12 minutes, but that's okay.
I'll extend the
I'm
answers.
sure you'll figure something out.
Yeah, I'll expand them. I don't know.
That's good. Hey, listen, seriously, thank you for putting me behind the wheel on it. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your trust. And I hope I don't drive us into the woods somewhere on this.
I think it's going to be just fine.
But I've been trying to channel James Lipton, and I think I've been semi-successful in doing it.
Do you have like a pile of note cards? It's about 12 inches tall.
I don't have note cards. That's my problem. I've got big pieces of paper. And
you're more prepared for this show than I am for any of my shows. It's amazing.
No, you don't tell me that. You memorize your stuff. You've
That's
got
right.
it all up here. See, and not me. As you said, I'm a casual Star Wars fan. I sit there with Mom and we watch Boba Fett, and I try and make funny comments to her, and she turns around and says, "Please stop doing that." And I wish I were watching with you because you would appreciate them more, I think.
Probably, yes.
Anyway, let's go back over territory that you and I have gone over in several interviews in the past. But if we're going to do this Lipton style, which I'd like to.
Sure.
It'd probably be the most appropriate. And let's go back to 1977, Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
In a 70 millimeter theater in Paramus, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of two theaters in the entire northern New Jersey that's showing Star Wars. Star Wars was not a wide area release at that time. I don't think it went wide area until right around Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not easy to get in to see this movie. And yet, I think you were one of the last, if not the last, kid in your neighborhood to see it.
See, I don't recall it that way. That's great.
That's the way I remember it. At least that's the excuse you used when you were bugging me to take you to see the damn.
Yeah, well, I imagine Mike had seen it like 2 or 3 times, so it
probably
makes sense.
so. Yeah. So what I want to know is, I'm trying to put you back there so that you can remember and relate how you felt when you felt the floor of the theater shake for the first time. You felt your chair vibrate and shake a little bit, and the screen was showing Darth Vader's ship come overhead. It looked like it was actually coming over our heads when we saw it on the theater. What was the feeling as a 7-year-old you had watching that?
So it's funny because I had somebody on a couple weeks ago who said, well, I have cred because I saw Return of the Jedi. I was 1 year old, but I saw the original release. And I have cred because I saw it, just as you described, in 1977 in a beautiful theater in New Jersey. And but I don't honestly remember much of the movie, oddly enough. I think when I think about what I remember from the movie, I more than anything else, and I think I've probably said this too, but the thing I remember more than anything else is leaving the theater and just being so like in a different world. And I remember sitting in the back of the station wagon that we had, and because it was before safety was invented, I just rolled around the back. And
that's right. Yeah,
I remember sitting there pretending that all the cars that passed us were TIE fighters, and I was trying to shoot them down. And so it's interesting. I don't have a specific memory of the movie itself, but I have a memory of the feeling of leaving the theater, in hindsight, recognizing that it changed my life. That movie experience changed my life, changed the direction of some of the things I did with my life. But I do remember just that elation of leaving that movie. It affected me so deeply, and I just remember it was like pure joy, like an 8-year-old kid, 7-year-old kid feeling nothing but just the pure joy that you want to get from a movie. Like I imagine, now that I have my own son, like when Jack sees something, like when you get it, that he's excited by whatever it is. But I mean, and that's what movies did in the 70s. And I think it's a different thing now because, great example, like when Dune came out, not that would have ever been a movie that probably would have changed Jack's life. He went with me to see it, and I think he regretted it because it was so long, but not as action packed as he would like. But now
we should tell the people who aren't aware of it that Jack is 9 years old, and most of the adventures you've had with Jack were when he was 8 years old, 7 years old, 6
Right.
years old. So his attention span, which I think is pretty extraordinary for a kid his age,
right,
still isn't up to where yours and mine might be. Well,
This is
yours
true.
might be.
Well, no, I don't
Mine
know
is
where.
shot to hell, so mine's gone.
But that sort of, the feeling when you went to a movie in the 70s, that was kind of the last of the days of 70s and 80s. The last of the days where going to a movie was like a big deal. Like I actually remember more of seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark in the theater in Newton, New Jersey than I remember seeing Star Wars. I remember seeing Empire. I remember Jedi. I remember vividly, but Star Wars, I just remember the pure joy that I felt, and I just was, it sunk into me immediately.
So then what you're saying is it probably changed your playing habits with your friends. I mean, your games changed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at 7 years old, that's what you guys are living for, I would think.
Yeah.
This was when you were 7 years old. The original Star Wars trilogy lasted till you were 13.
Right.
How did growing up in that period of your life, how was that affected by the games, the discussions, whatever, the interactions, particularly with your best friends?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of Mike.
Yeah,
also.
of course. Yeah. So it's funny because I think this is a weird connection, but I think before I saw Star Wars, the only other entertainment I ever reenacted on the playground as a kid was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I don't know why, but like, honestly, I can recite that as much as I can recite A New Hope. It's weird, I know, but I'm okay with that. But after seeing Star Wars, I mean, it changed everything that we did, everything that we played, every way that we went about it. Mike and I went so far as to, we wanted to make an 8mm movie of Star Wars, and we got all the props and things. So we did get there. So it was everything that it became everything we did. We played, Mike and I played with our action figures. He had the Death Star set. I had the Dagobah set. He had he had these figures. I had those figures. We traded figures. We went back, but Star Wars was what we played every single day. The other thing that was a dramatic change, because not only was Mike my best friend who lived down the street, literally, walked through neighbors' yards to get to each other's house. My other best friend was Kevin, as you remember, Kermit.
Mm-hmm,
and
sure.
He's not listening, so we can call him Kermit here. We called him Kermit to his face when he was 7
He
years old.
really did look like Kermit.
He looked a lot like Kermit. This is true. But I remember I would go to his house and after school, and we would listen to the LP of the story of Star Wars over and over and over and over again. And that's probably why I have the movie memorized, not because I saw it so many times, but because I listened to it so many times. And so, but everything we did, everything we played was Star Wars related. Everything.
Did you have a favorite toy that you had during that time?
I think the Dewback toy. I think I really liked the Dewback toy when I had that. And I don't know why. It was just one of those really cool, it was, I don't know. It just, but it's funny, like the weird things you remember, right? 45 years later, 40 years later. You remember the smell of toys. Like I remember the plastic smell, the rubbery smell of the dewback, because it had like a little rubber flap that you put the stormtrooper in, so it looked like he was riding it, and it just had that plasticky new toy smell. And like I can still be brought right back to that. So that was probably my favorite toy that I remember.
So this lasted until you were, well, after the third movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
Was there, after that time, was there a time in your life when you thought, Star Wars, it's too nerdy for me. I'm too cool for Star Wars. And you kind of threw it on the shelf? I mean, not the shelf behind you there.
Right, no, because that's clearly I've thrown a lot of it on the shelf behind me.
Right.
Wow. No, you know what? That's the interesting thing. We talk a lot on the show about the dark times, right, between Jedi and the Phantom Menace, and there was some books, and I remember I read the Thrawn books, but I never ever felt that Star Wars was uncool, because I think I was just naturally kind of a nerdy kid anyway. So it's not like, and also because it had become this dark times, and I think this is one of the things that people don't tend to talk about is nobody talked about it. So it's not like I was wearing a Star Trek shirt, which, Star Trek was always nerdy no matter what. And I enjoy Star Trek, but it was always nerdy. And Star Wars,
well, always for you.
Well,
this is a POV thing.
It's always nerdy to me. Even me as a Star Wars fan was like, those guys are kind of nerdy. No, it's not. I mean, really, Star Trek though always had that reputation, just because of the conventions. They were the first conventions. Blah blah blah. I'm digging myself into a hole here. Don't at me. But the thing with the dark times, it's just that it went away and nobody really talked about it. So I never walked away from it. It just wasn't a high priority for me, but I was always a big fan. I never thought to put away a Star Wars t-shirt because it's not cool anymore. I always kind of stuck with it.
What pulled you back in? Was it writing the questions for the trivia game?
Well, yeah, I think so. So in the mid 90s, what year did you release the game?
1993.
Right.
Because the
93.
question.
Wow,
let me say this. We didn't release it in 93. In 93, we began creating it because the questions are copyright 1994. In fact, I checked that when I was doing the questions here.
And I'm going to give a shout out to Matt, who's in the chat. Matt is the guy who went and found a copy of the Amazing Science Fiction Horror Trivia game on eBay and mailed it to me. It was amazing to get it back. But yeah, I think that kind of pulled me back because at that time, let me see, 93, I was, I think around that time, so starting to write the questions got me back into sort of rewatching the movies again, right? There was some of the Thrawn books, and there were some of the, and honestly, I didn't love a lot of the EU books because to me they felt very science fiction-y. And I've said it before, and when Ken Nabzok was on the show, we both agreed that I'm not a sci-fi fan, I'm a Star Wars fan, which doesn't mean that you're not. Sci-fi isn't great. It's just that I'd seek out a fantasy book before a sci-fi book, probably. But yeah, I think writing the questions for your game, and for those that aren't familiar with it, the Amazing Science Fiction Hard Trivia game was a game that you and a bunch of your friends put together. It was a trivia board game, just perfect timing, just as the internet was taking off, so nobody wanted to play board games. It was an unfortunate
story of my life.
Just missed it by that much. But no, I kid, but it was great because it was really a cool opportunity, and it forced me to go back. And what's interesting about those questions is wrote, what was it, almost 200 questions based only on movies. 3 movies, the original trilogy.
3 movies, that's right. And I remember the only advice I gave you for writing the questions was, keep in mind, you're not writing the questions to show how smart you are, how much you know about Star Wars. You're writing the questions so that the people who have to answer them can show how much they know about Star Wars.
Right.
And the difficulty gap between you and the people playing the game, once you caught on to that, your questions were great. And they were definitely useful.
Well, I appreciate that. But it's funny because when Matt sent me the copy of the game, and I started going through the questions, I was like, my goodness, these could not be more rudimentary. But keep in mind, and the thing to remember is this was almost 30 years ago. So not only was there no Phantom Menace, no sequel or prequel trilogy, or a very limited number of books, there was no extended universe. This was written for people who were just there were no deep Star Wars nerds to the extent that there are now, because you couldn't go that deep. You could just watch the movies. You could be a fan and expert of the movies. So yeah, questions like I don't even remember some of them, but they were pretty basic. But I enjoyed doing it, and it, like I said, it pulled me back into watching the movies again, and probably rekindled something at the right time, because little did we know that the special editions were going to come out, and then the prequels, and then Star Wars was back.
So now it's 1994, and you're writing a column for the Amazing Science Fiction and Horror Trivia Game newsletter that was sent out by U.S. mail,
right,
to over 1,000 people.
Which was over 1,000 people, really?
Yes, it did, because we used to have people sign up at the conventions that we did.
Okay. And
they would put their address down if they wanted a newsletter, and hell, they weren't paying for it, so they all signed up for it. Wow. And it was. I think we started out at about 700, and it went over 1,000.
Wow.
This led to an invitation for you to write for a monthly science fiction fanzine. You remember that?
Yeah. What was it called?
First Light.
First Light.
The name of it. Yeah.
Yeah. She was in Colorado, right? The editor was in Colorado, right?
She was in Colorado, and she had asked you. She went right by me. I was the editor of the damn newsletter. She goes right to you, and she wants you to write a column, a Star Wars column for her. Was that when you started doing your first interviews?
Yeah, that was kind of when I kind of remembered that I wanted to write. It was fun to be kind of challenged with that, and to there wasn't a lot of interviews, if I remember correctly. There were a lot more kind of POV pieces, right? There was one about a nephew. There was one about just sort of getting back into it. I think I did one about, and maybe it was for your newsletter, Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Yes, I remember that.
And some of those, but it definitely rekindled sort of that excitement and that challenge of writing a piece. And again, this was before, really, it sounds so old, but it was before the internet, so there was not a lot of blogging or anything like that. This was an opportunity to kind of put words down on a paper and read them and kind of capture what you're thinking, which was a really great experience.
And who was your first interviewee?
for First Light?
For any publication.
Well, the first interviewee for any publication that I recall, unless you're thinking of something else, was Ben Burt for Star Wars Galaxy magazine.
That's correct, right?
Yeah.
That's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And that was for Star Wars Galaxy, huh?
Yeah, that was for Star Wars Galaxy, and that was because he was directing or producing and creating this IMAX movie called Special Effects, and the IMAX premiere was in New Jersey, and that's how I ended up talking to Steve Sansweet. So the story there, if you want the story.
Yes, you're jumping my question, but hey.
The apple doesn't fall far from
That's
the tree,
true.
I guess.
That is true.
But yeah, so there were two things that were going on. So after I had my writing interest rekindled, the internet was just starting. I created a GeoCities website called Echo Base. And because there was some Star Wars buzz, right? There were rumors that they were going to make prequels, and so there was a new interest in Star Wars. And I believe, and I can't prove this, of course, but I believe I was one of the very first. Well, I know that I was one of the very first websites. I may have been the first fan website, and I had gotten so many. So many followers at that time, because there was nothing else, right? The internet was new, that people started thinking that perhaps I worked for Lucasfilm. So today they would call me a Disney shill, but back then they just wanted all the information they could get about Star Wars. So at that time, it was just as the special editions were starting to be promoted, being created. And so Steve Sansweet was doing he was going to Star Trek conventions because there was no Star Wars celebrations, and he was doing a 40-minute talk on the special editions, and he'd show some footage and some pictures.
In fact, I had been to one of those because we were going around hawking the trivia game at the time, and our paths crossed with Steve Sansweet's on several occasions.
Yeah.
But I never really had a chance to talk with him much other than to say, hello, how are you? And I don't think he would have remembered who I was if you had asked him about it.
But he was such a great guy. So the story is pretty wild because I had started getting so many the longer version of the story, another piece of it is I was contacted by the Liberty Science Center in New Jersey because they had the IMAX theater, and they were going to be the first theater that had Ben Burtt's special effects. They contacted me, again, one of the only Star Wars sites at the time. It was before StarWars.com for sure. They contacted me and said, hey, would you mind promoting the fact that we're having this special effects movie? And being a marketer at heart, I said, sure, but I want something in return. And they were like, okay, what do you want in return? I said, how about I will create a coupon. So this is like people were printing these coupons out on dot matrix printers. I said, I'll create a coupon and you give me 2 tickets to the premiere of the movie. And they said, yeah, sure, we'll do that. That's fine. They did, this was 1996, 95, something like that. So it didn't matter. Like, just, yeah, that's fine. So anyway, so people are going to my Echo Base website, and Steve is going around the country doing these different Star Trek conventions, talking about the special editions. And I was starting to get emails from people saying, hey, where's Steve going to be? Where's Steve Sansweet going to be? I want to go and see this presentation. Because it was, again, the internet was slow. It was before YouTube. So if you wanted to see this presentation, you had to go to it.
Well, see, if I had known this, you could have come down with me and sold a few games and stopped off and introduced yourself to Steve Sansweet.
I could have done it way back then. Yeah.
Way back then.
Marketing was different then. You would have had like, meet the question writers. You would have done it completely different. But so people were bothering me or bugging me, trying to see if I knew. And I was like, I finally got to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't know where he's going to be. So I'm going to call Lucasfilm and I'm just going to get his schedule. So I called Lucasfilm. They pick up the phone. Whoever picks up the phone at the front of Lucasfilm, I don't know. And I said, hey, listen, I would like to get Steve Sansweet's schedule for his special edition presentations. And they said, okay, hang on a second. I was like, okay, great. So they put me on hold. It felt like forever. And I remember I was literally like laying on the floor in my office, as you do, just, waiting for them to pick up the phone. And the phone clicks through. And on the other end, I hear, this is Steve Sansweet. And I was like, holy cow, because not just because Steve Sansweet was the guy doing these presentations, but I had every book that Steve had written because I was heavy into collecting at the time. And Steve, of course, is the ultimate Star Wars collector. So I'm talking to this guy and I look over on my bookshelf from laying on the floor, sitting up suddenly and realizing that, I'm looking at the guy who wrote all these books that are sitting there on my shelf. And he was just such a great guy. And he was asking me questions about my website. I explained the situation to him because, of course, he was involved in the first StarWars.com. And so he wanted to understand that. And and he said, so what else are you doing? And I told him about the game and I told him about the website. And I said, hey, listen, I'm going to be at the premiere of the IMAX film with Ben Burt. Do you have anybody covering it? He said, no. And so he said, tell you what, send me your stuff. So the stuff I wrote for First Light, the stuff I wrote for you, I sent to him overnight in FedEx, probably cost me like $30 to overnight it in FedEx, sent it to him. He read it. He got back to me and he said, yeah, give me 150 words on the IMAX premiere. And that was it. That was my first entry. And I have to say, and I remember talking to you about it because you edited it before I sent it to Star Wars Galaxy. 150 words is hard to write. It is like nothing. It's like Twitter before, we went with the characters.
I remember agonizing over editing it because not being a professional editor and having written, a few things, I didn't know what professional editors did, and I had a tendency to try and edit your writing into my style, which was totally wrong.
Right.
And you got it back, and I'm sure you said, well, he gave it a good shot, and you probably sent it the way it was, and
Yeah,
the bottom
ignore it.
line was, look, you ended up writing. So
Yeah. Yeah, and he read it and he liked it and he put it in there, and then I did. I think it was the next 4 Star Wars Galaxy magazines. I had a piece, and each one got progressively larger. I talked to Ben Burt a second time, and Tom
I didn't
Christopher.
know that.
Yeah, one of my articles for Star Wars Galaxy was during the special edition re-releases, and I talked to Ben Burt and Tom Christopher about revisiting the soundtracks to the movies, and so it was cool. So not only have I spoken to Ben Burt once, I've spoken to him twice, which still blows me away, because as a Star Wars fan, it's interesting. Star Wars fans tend to be behind the scenes fans. I feel like that's just sort of like kind of goes hand in hand, and maybe it's an OT thing, I'm not sure, but certainly was a big behind the scenes fan. So to talk to Ben Burt twice that's amazing. I'm thrilled with that.
So how long did that gig last?
It was about 1.5 years, and I don't know why it stopped. I think I just stopped writing. I don't know what happened. I think, honestly, it's probably like the day job got to be more effort than I could put into the freelance, because the freelance gig, they wrote you a check, but it was like, I mean, you were doing it because you got to be in Star Wars Galaxy magazine, and
right?
So,
exactly.
so the day job had to take precedence, but it was it was about, I think it's 5 or 6 issues. Yeah.
And yet you transitioned over to Star Wars Insider.
Well, I did one article for Star Wars Insider because I was going to the New York City premiere of the Phantom Menace, and I reached out to Steve and I said, much like the IMAX coverage, ironically, I think my last piece was covering the premiere of the Phantom Menace. So Steve put me in touch with Scott Chernoff, who's actually been on my show a number of times. He's gone on to write for Conan O'Brien and BoJack Horseman, and really cool, interesting stuff. But he was like, yeah, if you're going to be there, write me a piece. So I did, and got to cover the premiere of the Phantom Menace in New York.
What was that like?
It was insane. It was insane, and I'll tell the story again because I love telling it. I tell it every single day. But I was this. It was 99, right? So I was 29 years old, 28 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what you wear to a New York City premiere. Like, I had no idea. So I wore a suit. To a freaking movie premiere in New York City. And, I think Boyz II Men was there. Macaulay Culkin was there. Donald Trump was there. Natalie Portman. It was like this. Everybody who is a celebrity that lives in New York City was there. Glenn Close, John Leguizamo. So I go to this movie premiere, and I do remember the Phantom Menace, and it's funny how I've come around on the Phantom Menace, because I remember literally when it started with first of all, with the crawl about the trade routes and taxation. I remember everybody in the theater was kind of like, what's going on here? And then that when the Nemoidians came out with their really, really bad Asian accents, that was just stereotypical, like, this feels weird. I remember I literally thought maybe this isn't really the movie. And that was honestly my very first thought within the first 5 minutes. And you could almost sense the bit, because everybody was so excited, right? Everybody wanted Star Wars back. And there was almost like a little bit of a letdown in the theater. And, by the time it ended, it was a lot of fun and everybody had a good time. But as I'm walking out of the theater, here I am, I'm wearing a suit. And behind me, as I'm exiting, I could still see this vividly. Christian Slater is right behind me. And I was a big Christian Slater fan. I loved Interview with the Vampire. I loved Heathers, all the things he was in. I'm like, when am I going to get a chance to talk to Christian Slater again? So I turn around and I say, Christian, like I know him. I go, Christian, what did you think of the movie? And he looks at me, and I could tell in his head, he's like, who is this guy? He's in a suit. Should I know this guy? Do I know this guy? And also, in hindsight, and I think some people might remember this, like, there was rumors that Christian Slater was going to be Anakin in the second movie. it wasn't like, different rumor mill at the time. But so he looks at me and gives the most politically correct answer you can possibly give. He looks at me and gives me that Christian Slater look, and he says, "Visually stunning." And that was his response.
He gave you a Variety headline.
It's the safest possible answer, right? He didn't have to say it sucked. He didn't have to say it was wonderful. He didn't have to be on record saying it was the best or worst he ever saw. The movie was visually stunning. And and so, but that was, and then we went to the after party at Mars 2112 in New York City. And my only other really good memory from there was waiting outside the restroom for my girlfriend at the time, and John Leguizamo was waiting for his, and he was just ripping jokes, and he was like, "You got to wait forever for these women. They take forever in there." But that was cool. It was just an amazing experience to be at the premiere of, because I waited forever for Star Wars. I was an OT kid. Star Wars, as we just said at the beginning, Star Wars to me was everything to me. And so to be able to go back and be at the premiere of the return of Star Wars, in hindsight, it's really an amazing opportunity. So,
and then came the dark time, right? I mean, for you anyway, as a fan, your involvement with Star Wars just kind of dried up, stopped.
Yeah, I mean, after the prequels, there wasn't much going on. Kind of felt like we were done, right? The last scene of Revenge of the Sith kind of makes, it's makes the connection to episode 4, and it feels like, all right, we're done with Star Wars. It's great. And I remember you and I talking about how great it would be if Lucas gave the reins to somebody else to just write different Star Wars stories. And we were like, that'll never happen, but that would be pretty cool. So,
and little did we realize he not only gave the reins, he sold the reins for tons.
$4 billion.
$4 billion. What a set of reins. Wow.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yep.
So then you dropped away from the fan. There was really nothing exciting, I guess, going on. Nothing exciting enough to keep you as involved as you had been, right?
Yeah. I mean, I watched Star Wars with Lily when she was 2, which was before, before the Disney acquisition. So it was just like, hey, this is Daddy's favorite movie. Let's sit and watch it. But yeah, I mean, there was not, but again, I mean, I was still a fan. I still had, my Star Wars stuff. I had, a box full of action figures in the basement. And, but yeah, I mean, Star Wars, as far as all of us sort of OT and PT fans, prequel trilogy fans, it was done. It was great. It was fantastic. And, glad we had the opportunity, and what's next. And we didn't know what was next, of course.
But then, as James Lipton might say, in 2003, you had the first of your life-changing events. You were married.
Yes, I was. Yes.
And then that was followed in 2009 by your next life-changing event, the birth of your first child.
Yes.
I do a lousy Lipton, don't I?
Yeah, you do, but I get where you're going with it, so it works.
And then in 2012, you had your third life-changing event, the birth of your son.
Yes.
Now, all this foreshadowed, am I using the right word? Foreshadowed getting back into Star Wars fandom heavily.
Yeah.
Do you think somehow there was a connection between your wanting to share your Star Wars experience with your kids from the parental point of view, as opposed to a 7-year-old, sharing it with his friends?
Right.
And you getting back into Star Wars fandom from there?
I think, well, I remember exactly where I was. Like, I can tell you exactly where in the house. You would know it, right? But the door right next to the garage, I remember I had my phone because Hurricane Sandy had ripped through the Northeast. We were without power for 10 days. You were without power for 2 weeks, right?
We moved into a motel in Pennsylvania.
Right. And my wife and 2 kids moved into my brother-in-law's house, and I was like sitting at the house like it was a zombie apocalypse. I felt like the only thing missing was a shotgun and a rocking chair, just sitting on the front porch waiting for the zombies to come. But I was going back to the house and spending, because we had just bought the house too. We were only there about a year, and so Jack and Lily and Melissa were over at my brother-in-law's house, and I had my phone, and it came across Facebook that Disney had acquired Star Wars, had acquired Lucasfilm for $4 billion, and that they were going to be making Star Wars Episode 7. And it didn't matter that it was 45 degrees in the house, and that I hadn't showered in 3 days, and that I was so excited. I was cautiously optimistic because, again, transparently, and I am very open and honest about this, I still felt burned by the prequels. It took me until very, I would say within the last 5 years to really appreciate the prequels. And so I was cautiously optimistic that we were going to get something. And I still believe that the fandom, I don't care who you are, a good portion of the fandom were burned by the prequels, and the very first line of The Force Awakens, when Lor San Tekka says this will begin to set things right, I believe that is a meta sort of conversation, kind of a line to put out there, saying, hey, we hear you, but we're gonna start to set this right now.
Without a doubt.
But interestingly, the prequels have now become so important, and I'm a huge Phantom Menace fan now, which I couldn't say before. I mean, it's probably because I wrote that book, but it's because I'm a huge Phantom Menace fan, and I did not like that movie at all. It was my least favorite of the 3 for a very long time.
What drew you toward podcasting? Of all things, you're a writer.
Of all things, yeah, I'm a writer. But first of all, I don't have to write many words for this, so that's good.
So you're a lazy writer.
Me no like words. Me think words too big. No, that's not true. So what drew me to podcasting was, so for some reason, I decided that and before I became a huge fan of the Phantom Menace, my buddy Eric Montez, who you and I know, we've played poker with him multiple times. He's a funny dude. Eric and I were talking, and I had said that, I felt like the Phantom Menace was the movie version of a great novel that didn't quite get it right. Because I always felt that Darth Maul was wasted, because I also didn't watch a lot of the Clone Wars, because as we went into that dark times, when the Clone Wars were on, it was on like Cartoon Network, which I didn't really even watch. So it was sort of very secondary to me. But I decided that I was going to write the novel for the Phantom Menace, keeping in mind that Terry Brooks already did that and got paid to do it. And I did it for pure fan fiction. But so I did this book, I don't even know. It's like 120,000 word novel of the Phantom Menace. And what I decided was I wanted to get this out there in a free ebook version. Obviously it's going to be free because it's fan fiction, so you're not going to make any money on it. And it was so much fun to write the book. It was so much fun to explore characters and look at things differently and go into characters that didn't exist and really make it a story about political intrigue versus an action summer blockbuster. And it was so much fun to do that I wanted to get it out to people. So I got into Twitter and I started hanging out on Twitter, and I was reached out to from 2 different podcasts, and they had me on their shows. Because, the Fletcher combination of Star Wars Galaxy was interesting to people. And so I was on a handful of podcasts, 2 podcasts. And I remember I got off the second podcast I did, and I was like, I could do this. And the reason I thought I could do it was because some of the stuff that I did with Steve for Star Wars Galaxy was these fantastic fans stories, these stories of people, these 2 brothers in Florida who built 6-8 foot long Star Destroyers out of plywood. This guy who was a lawyer in upstate New York who painted minifigures, just like I had this connection with fans, and I was coming back to the Star Wars fandom because I was writing this Phantom Menace fan fiction novelization. And so I was listening to podcasts. There were a handful of podcasts I was listening to. And I was like, you know what? I could do a podcast about podcasters. I could do a podcast about people that I think are interesting in social media and just talk to them, just to get
Like
to know
a-
their stories.
Like a coffee table book about coffee tables.
Exactly. Me and Kramer, we go way back. But so now I'll just say it that way, podcast about podcast. That's a horrible idea. But I just I decided to go for it. And it was interesting because and I think it's just because of my natural ability that came from doing work with Steve to make phone calls, to pull on some of those connections. I was able to get some pretty good, and I look back at the list of people who I had on the show early on. I mean, I had Anthony Bresnikan in like my 7th or 8th interview, like, and he was like the Star Wars writer for Entertainment Weekly at the time, and I was over at Vanity Fair. He came on my show because I asked him, because I did this, and look, I'm not going to lie. I said, hey, I used to write for Star Wars Galaxy magazine. I was a contributing editor, and that obviously helped. But yeah, I mean, I was drawn to podcasting because I wanted to get to know the people that I was finding interesting. And the podcast has always been about talking to people and just getting to know their stories. And I make a really conscious effort to, whether it's, a guy who like Hal Hickel, who has won Oscars for some of my favorite movies, or somebody like Dan Donahue, who is the voice of one of my favorite characters in any video game, or just an average sort of podcaster or social media guy who's got 400 followers on Twitter, who's just an interesting guy who I love having a conversation with. I treat them all exactly the same. I want to get to know their Star Wars story. I want to talk to them about what it is about Star Wars. And that's sort of the underlying undercurrent of this show that consistently is that sort of magic moment when two Star Wars fans meet. So the example I use is Greg Reifin, Scott Reifin, who is he is a conservative talk show host out of Georgia. Great guy. Michael Nipp, who's probably hanging out with us in the chat, connected me with him. He's me, I'm an extreme moderate, a little bit more on the left. He's a right-wing conservative, but we captured that moment and that intersection where we're both Star Wars fans and politics didn't matter. We didn't even go into it. In fact, at one point, Scott and I had blocked each other on Twitter because we just couldn't deal with each other. And then we became friends. And he tells a story on the show where he was, he was moving into somebody was moving into his condo unit or something. And the guy had a Star Wars shirt on, and they started a conversation. And turns out the guy, was a Boba Fett cosplayer in the 501st. And it was just a great conversation. So I really wanted to use this show to have that conversation with anybody, whether you've heard of them as an author like Kevin Scott, or somebody who you may not have ever heard of on Twitter, but just that moment when a couple Star Wars fans get together and discover that they have this thing in common and explore that. And it's this opportunity for me to start, like, if I see somebody with a Star Wars shirt and I talk to them at a ShopRite or wherever I am, supermarket, just to dig into that extra layer of, hey, so what was the first time you saw Star Wars, and tell me about it. Has it impacted your life, and what is it you love about it? And that, I think, that's what Star Wars can do really well. And social media puts us in a spot where there's some real ugliness out there, really bad. But you throw all that out and you realize that Star Wars is this connection. You were talking before about, asking me about how it, when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, playing with Mike and playing with Kevin, and just like Star Wars was everything to us. And there's no reason why you can't keep that. Yeah, you have your job and you have your life and you have your stresses and your responsibilities. But if you talk for an hour with somebody about Star Wars, that's almost better than watching the movies in a way, or watching the shows.
I can definitely understand that. But while you were talking, I thought of something that may sound like this one could take the buggy right into the woods, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. Suppose somehow you were able to get George Lucas onto your podcast, okay?
Yes.
Would he be relevant?
Yeah, he would be it's interesting because, and it's funny you asked that question after I talked about social media, because there's this really interesting divide, if you will, among people who don't like the Disney Star Wars. And you're lucky that you don't spend time on social media and see all this crap. But George Lucas is still really relevant, if for no other reason, because he still engages. He and Dave Filoni still talk. And he is the maker, no matter what, right? And
So
yeah.
let me ask you this then. Suppose he came out with something in an interview where he was describing a character, describing something from the Star Wars that he oversaw and that he created.
Yeah.
And he came out with a revelation that nobody knew about a character or a plot device or whatever that went against canon that Disney has come out with. Would people discard it? Would they count it? What do you think?
It would cause a ginormous shitstorm on social media for sure, right? Because
granted, part of his sale to Disney probably prevents him from saying stuff like that.
Well, no, he's been out there and he's talked about what his vision for episode 7, 8, and 9, and people who don't like the quote unquote Disney Star Wars are very comfortable with saying, see, they didn't listen to George's vision. They opted against it. So they could bring us this woke, politically correct Disney crap. And that's kind of sad, but I think it would be totally relevant. And I think he has come out and he even, there's sort of a quote where he calls, he calls like Disney slavers or something like that. It's pretty ugly, but the reality is he did sell it. It's no longer his. In fact, there was a conversation just going on social media today about, the people who have now get to write in the Disney or in the Star Wars space. And George has given it up. A friend of mine, Mitch Dyer, who's a writer for a number of Star Wars games, he said if it was so important to George, however, he wouldn't have sold it. And that's true, right? He could have let it die. If Star Wars, look, nobody's going to pass a $4 billion payday, right? For goodness sake, nobody's going to do that. However, George didn't have to sell Lucasfilm. He didn't have to sell the rights to Star Wars. And if he was so concerned about keeping it the way his vision was, he would have put stipulations in that he had to consult on every script and every concept. He may not have sold it. He may have found a way to make it work. So ultimately, his vision is really important, but he's since gone on to give up the story. He's passed it along, just like you and I talked about 15 years ago. Wouldn't it be cool if George let somebody else write in his sandbox? And I honestly think we're getting some amazing stories that every single one of them is unexpected, not well received by some people, but completely unexpected and really deep storytelling that I don't think people thought was there.
Okay, you've led me around some of the questions I was going to ask, but I can't resist now because you're taking me down this path. Mandalorian. Did it live up to your expectations? And was there anything in Mandalorian that you found disappointing that if you could get on the phone with Filoni and Favreau, you would say, hey guys, do this instead of that?
So I think Mandalorian broke everybody's expectations. I don't think anybody expected it to be what it was. And I think that's great. Honestly, I've said this before, but every single Star Wars project we've heard about since the films, Rogue One, Solo: A Star Wars Story, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, every single one of them, my first reaction as a lifelong Star Wars fan, as a 7-year-old playing in the playground with Matt and Mike and Kevin, my first reaction is, do I need that story? Like the Kenobi series, right? When I heard the Kenobi series was coming, my first thought, honestly, was, I don't know if I need that. But Mandalorian, specifically to Mandalorian, what I've learned, I think a good way to answer this is tell you kind of what I think I've learned about Star Wars as a result of The Mandalorian and now going into Book of Boba Fett. I think one of the most important things to recognize is that Star Wars is completely cheesy. and that's amazing. The acting in Mandalorian, nobody's going to win any awards for acting in that show. Carl Weathers is so over the top. It's amazing and it's wonderful. it's pure cheese. I think, I love Pedro Pascal, but his like his delivery is it's weird. Like, so where I'm going with it is you're not going for the acting. You're not even going for the action, because I think that's another thing that I would say about Mandalorian, and more so with Book of Boba Fett. I feel like the action feels a little weird. You get a great scene like the train scene from Book of Boba Fett 2 weeks ago. And then you get a weird fight like you have the slow motion chase that you had this past week with the speeders. So it's inconsistent, but what I love about Star Wars, what I've learned that I love about Star Wars is the lore. I love what's going on with building these characters, building these stories. And it doesn't matter if you tell the story in a comic book, in a novel, in a TV show, or a movie. I'm there for the story. So what would I change about Mandalorian? I don't know that I would change anything. What I think I think Star Wars is being delivered in a very different way now, and I think it works. It's not perfect, but I think it's perfect in its imperfection in a way.
Do you find, since your finger is pretty much on the pulse of fandom there,
Yeah.
do you
better or worse?
Yeah. Do you find that fandom in general is happy with Book of Boba Fett, or are they disappointed because they're comparing it to The Mandalorian, and Mandalorian is now on such a high pedestal?
I think so. First of all, it's safe to say that the fandom there's a group of the fandom. In fact, they're known as the Phantom Menace, and they have been pissed off ever since The Last Jedi. And some of them love The Mandalorian, some don't. But for the most part, Mandalorian was extremely well received. They hate Kathleen Kennedy. They give this poor woman no respect, although she's created every movie they've ever loved from their childhood. So there's this interesting divide. And so there are people who are looking for problems in the Book of Boba Fett. There are people, the way I described it actually just today in Twitter, it's almost like you have Twitter, and I don't think you do. Do you have Twitter? You don't have Twitter account, do you?
Do I have Twitter?
Yeah.
I think I do.
That's the best answer of the day. That's great.
I'm not sure. But if you want, next time we get together, I'll show you my phone and you can tell me.
Tell me if I have Twitter.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what I said on Twitter today was that the people who don't like the Book of Boba Fett are expecting these action figure fantasies that they created. And there are these stories. I said it on Streaming Star Wars this past week. These stories exist. The stories of Boba Fett as the sort of ruthless Old West bounty hunter exist. But that's not what this story is about. This is the story of, as I put on Streaming Star Wars this week, all that experience now being used to get a job in upper management, right? So he is now in a different spot. But the people who have these action figure fantasies, who want to see the brutality that they imagined about Boba Fett, they're not happy. But people who have a desire to get a solid story, and let's face it, the Book of Boba Fett story, I think through the first 3 episodes is as good a story as The Mandalorian through 2 seasons, in that we're learning a lot about this guy. We're learning how somebody manages through this life-changing experience and becomes a different person, is reborn, and has to make a decision as to what that means. Do you give people the second chance you were given, or do you stay ruthless? And that's a really interesting story. Is it as fun as watching a guy with a jetpack, hunting people down and killing them? That's a video game. That's not a fun story to watch.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah. I can see Jack playing the video game
for
Book of Boba Fett.
Yep, absolutely. So the fandom is split on it, and it's a shame because I think the reason it's split is because it's this group of people that want to find fault with everything that has happened since 2012 when Disney bought Star Wars. Now most people were comfortable and happy with Mandalorian. They loved when Luke Skywalker showed up, because that was the Luke Skywalker they wanted to see, and frankly, we all loved that scene. But we're 7 straight weeks of slashing and killing is boring. That's not a story.
Isn't there a rumor that another character is going to show up in Book of Boba Fett, similar to a character like Luke Skywalker?
Are you saying the Han Solo rumor?
Oh yeah, do people know about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, whether they do or not, it's a rumor. So it's I'm happy to talk about it. I don't see it happening. I know that Matt, who's watching in the chat, is probably a huge, like, he's begging. In fact, he's reached out to me, and we told him that if Han Solo shows up, Nick and I will do a reaction show that afternoon if it shows up, because but yeah, I mean, that would be cool, but that would be total fan service. And I think that's this fine line that's walked between fan service and developing the story.
I'm going to bet you $1 right now on the air in front of all these people watching.
Yes.
That Han Solo shows up.
All right. I'll take that bet, because I don't think he's coming.
Okay, good.
All right.
You're on.
We're on. All right.
And speaking of on, we've reached that time of the interview.
Look at you, like you've done this show before. It's great. I love it.
Well, I was well trained. I was well coached by my son.
Do you want the 10 questions bumper? We can do that. Here we go.
Get ready.
Okay. For what?
These 10 questions, used by James Lipton on the Inside the Actors Studio, which he based on the 10 questions used by French TV presenter Bernard Pivot.
Bernard Pivot.
Yeah. The questions are Star Wars related.
Okay.
However, I've altered your questions since I am your father. Pray I don't alter them any further.
That was a very good use of 2 Vader lines from the same movie in one sort of hybrid. I like that. We'll have to.
Yeah. What do they call that nowadays when 2 different things are crunched together into one?
Mashup.
That's
a mashup.
It. That's it. It's a Darth Vader mashup quote.
There's nothing better than a 50-year-old guy and a 70-year-old guy saying, "What do the kids today call this?" It's
it's the thing.
The thing.
That thing.
Okay. Yeah. So I sent you my traditional 10 questions, and you have you've made them your own. Hey, it's your show tonight.
I've altered some of them, and I've tossed some others. I hope you don't mind. Frankly,
I
don't care.
Yeah. What am I going to do?
What are you going to do? First question is, what is your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
All right. I'm going to do like a lot of my guests do, and I'm going to give you all 3. My favorite Star Wars movie, without question, is The Empire Strikes Back. It always comes back to that one. I think it's because it's a good movie. Like it's a great Star Wars movie, but it's also a great movie, period, top to bottom. My favorite Star Wars book is Aftermath by Chuck Wendig. Just because I think it was sort of the return to Star Wars for me, and I just like the way Chuck writes. Although it's funny, a lot of people don't dig those books. I like all 3, but Aftermath is my favorite. And my favorite Star Wars show, I'd like to say Mando, because it's something I spent a lot of time with. But I think if I'm really taking it apart, I would probably say Rebels, which is funny because when I first saw the first clips from Rebels, I was like, this is going to be awful. And again, like I was saying before, there's so many I hear about them and I'm like, okay, I guess. And I get sucked in, but Rebels advanced the Star Wars story more than a lot of people give it credit for. Clone Wars did amazing things to fill in the backstory, but Rebels pushed the story forward and created some amazing characters.
What is your favorite non-Star Wars movie?
So this goes back and forth, but if at the end of the day, it's probably Jaws. I could watch Jaws every single day, and I just think Jaws is just such a great movie on so many levels, and it's a time capsule. Because I hate to say it like this because I sound like that guy, but they really don't make movies like Jaws anymore, and it's
Jaws was the first.
It was, and it was like the cast was perfect. You couldn't have set up a better cast, and it's much like Star Wars. So much of it should have failed. I always think about Ralph McQuarrie telling George, like, these things are going to look awful on screen, and all the problems that happened with Jaws. Bruce the Shark should not have worked and didn't most of the time, and Richard Dreyfuss hating Robert Shaw, like they hated each other, but it worked, and it's just that movie just works on every single level. It's got to be my favorite non-Star Wars movie for sure.
I'll do my name drop and say earlier in the year, Mom and I spent a little bit of time with the lady who was eaten by the shark at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
Very Bacalini, Susan Bacalini, her name is.
Awesome.
Very, very nice. Oh, very nice lady. If I weren't married to your mother, I would have asked her out. She was
wow.
Great. And then I found out she was married too, and she's quite wealthy, so she wouldn't have crossed a little peon like me.
Yeah, but you're quite the catch. So
that's what I think. Describe Star Wars if you were speaking to somebody who had never seen Star Wars before. Can you describe Star Wars in one complete, grammatically correct sentence?
Me no like words. So, in one modern day mythology. Well, let me make it a sentence as opposed to
yes.
Star Wars is modern day mythology.
There you go.
There you go. It's a sentence now.
It worked. Okay. Now here's one.
Okay.
Who was the actor or actress who made you say, "Wow, that's very cool," when you saw him or her in a movie or TV show and realized who she was or he was?
I'm going to need to ask you to explain that question a little bit more.
Sure. I'll give you an example.
Give me an example, yeah.
Of how what happened with me. Back in the 80s, I think it was, maybe it was the 90s, they tried to do a reboot of Maverick on television, and they made a series, and one of the villains in the series, he was the bad guy sheriff or whatever, was William Hootkins.
Oh,
and when I realized who he was, I said, "Wow, that's very cool." Seeing him outside of Star Wars. Did that ever happen to you?
I think it was William Hootkins actually. When I realized
that what I said?
It is, but I believe that's my choice because I didn't realize he was in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh,
he was one of the FBI agents, and I have a special place in my heart for William Hootkins because we have the same birthday.
Yes, he does.
So I would say him. I might also say I maybe going the other way around. Alan Tudyk as K2SO, because Alan Tudyk is. I remember when people think of Alan Tudyk, they think of all kinds of different things, but I always think of him as the pirate in Dodgeball. and then he was K2SO, who was one of my favorites. So going the other way, I would say Alan Tudyk in Star Wars, but William Hootkins absolutely, because he's also been he was in Batman. He was Commissioner Gordon or at least a police officer in the Michael Keaton Batman.
Very cool. And he died young. That was
he did. Well, I mean, the guy was like 300 pounds. I mean, his name was Porkins, for God's sakes, in Star Wars. You gotta value.
Who is your favorite behind the scenes person in Star Wars, and why?
My favorite behind the scenes person. I'll say two. One is Ben Burtt, just simply because I think Star Wars without the sounds. I had a conversation with somebody on the show. I can't remember who it was, but we talked about how, as amazing as the special effects are for Star Wars, it's all the different sounds, the little subtle things happening around that bring that to life. And so having met Ben Burtt is great. I guess, I'd also I'd like to meet Ryan Johnson. I'd love to talk to Ryan Johnson because I've said this before, and this pisses some people off, but I'm willing to say it. I think J.J. Abrams is a Star Wars movie fan, and I think Ryan Johnson is a Star Wars fan. I think the things that he pulled out of the lore to create The Last Jedi, and the way he thought about what all the movies meant, what the story meant. I mean, Ryan Johnson took a risk and called out the Jedi. I mean, the Jedi effed up, right? I mean, they missed the Emperor literally living in the same building as them and not caught it. Their hubris killed him. And he wrote this entire story about how Luke, upon doing more research, was like, you know what? It's time for the Jedi to end. Like, the Force is important. The Force is great. The Force can absolutely is important. But the Jedi, as the keepers of the Force, that might not be where we go. And so Ryan Johnson's perspective on stuff, I would love to talk to him about some of those deeper perspectives. And, you know, people love to get into what was the relationship with Kylo and Rey, and that's interesting stuff. I'm more interested in his perspective on the history of Star Wars and how they got to where they were in the movie that he directed and wrote.
Pete, which Star Wars character would it be cool to hang out with? And what would you want to do with him or her when you hung out?
Good question. I don't know. I feel like it's a cop out to say Lando because he's going to be a party on wheels wherever he goes. So I'm not going to say Lando, although he would be pretty cool to hang out with. I think it would be kind of cool to hang out with Finn because I think Finn is just like he's just having fun, and he's kind of like, I loved him in Canto Bight, where he was just like, he and Rose in Canto Bight in The Last Jedi, like Rose had to keep him on target. If it was me and him in Canto Bight, we'd be like, I know we got a mission, but look, let's get some chips, let's sit down at the table, let's have a little bit of fun, and we would have probably lost focus. So I think I would love to hang out with Finn. I think, and he's got an interesting story to tell.
Interesting. I'd be jamming with the Cantina Band myself. But, that's me.
Figuring Dan in the modal nodes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Which Star Wars collectible do you wish you owned?
Oh, do I wish I owned? Ooh, that's a good question. Which Star? You know, there's a couple things. I'll actually, now that I think about it, it's pretty easy. Regal Robot. Tom Spina was on the show, and he's a movie prop restorer, and he's got a company called Regal Robot, which issues replicas of all kinds of things. In fact, I have a couple of replicas that he's done, but the one that I really want is a full-size Tauntaun head, which sits on your wall like a deer that you might have hunted. I would love, you know, somewhere in here to have like the big Tauntaun head. That's the one that I want, the Regal Robot Tauntaun head. And Tom, if you're listening, I'm willing to, you know, if you want to give me a discount or something, I'd be happy to talk. I got a spot on the wall. I'm ready for it.
Oh, phone number flashing across the bottom.
Right. Act now.
Act now. If you, let's see, if you were a character in a Star Wars movie or TV show, what would be your mode of transportation?
I don't know. Everybody says the Millennium Falcon, and that's cool. But I think I've always loved the X-Wing, and that feels like kind of a lame answer. So I'm gonna go a slightly different route because for two reasons. One, because I have a fun little story with it, and number two is I just think it feels like it reminds me in a way of my old Chevy Citation, and that's my I would love to own the Razor Crest, just because I thought that the Mandalorian ship was just it was a place you lived, but you could almost see the wrappers from the candy bars on the floor. It was just like it was lived in. And the reason what reinforced my love of the Razor Crest was when Hal Hickel was on the show. And he's the Oscar-winning special effects artist who works on Mandalorian, and he and I were talking, and I was gushing about how much I love the Razor Crest, and it's so cool. It's like a new Millennium Falcon, and I have the Lego set, and I'm excited to do it. And then the next day was the episode where the Razor Crest got blown up, and he just let me go because he couldn't do it right. Like, what is he gonna say? Before you get too excited, don't get attached to this thing because tomorrow you're gonna be pissed. But he can't say that. But I just love the Razor Crest. So I think that would be my ship. And just I always I think about the way the Razor Crest barely made it to that one planet, the fishing planet. So I remember I had to tie the muffler up on my Chevy Citation with a wire that ran through the doors of my car and just underneath, just to hold my muffler up so I could get it to the shop. So I'm going with Razor Crest.
Are there any, or this isn't one of the 10 questions. You just got me thinking about it. Are there any organic modes of transportation in which, like a ship, you go inside it to move around, to get around?
Like a living vehicle or something?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think so.
Well, why not?
Hold on, let me give him a call. Let me see.
Would you?
Let me call Filoni.
We got to do. We have to do something about this.
If it shows up in the next episode of Book of Boba Fett, I'm going to freak out. So.
What Star Wars moment still gives you goosebumps?
So this is really strange, but every time Luke goes down the trench in A New Hope, I've seen it 1,000 times since 1977. There's always still a chance somehow in my head that he doesn't sink the shot, and I don't know why. So I would say that is the shot. I always like the tension that's built there is perfect, and so Luke blowing up the Death Star, putting the proton torpedo in, hitting the shot. I would say that's the one.
Nice. And finally,
yes.
Which line from Star Wars do you think is the most revealing about you?
About me?
Yeah. In other words, if you wanted somebody to know about you as a person, whatever, how you think, how you live, whatever, is there a line from Star Wars that you could quote to them that would reveal something about you?
That's a good question. I feel like there's probably, there's always the go-to is something Yoda might have said, but I think, it's probably something that's a little bit more sort of humorous, something like, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe, sorry about the mess. Han Solo is walking out of the canteen and he throws a coin to the bartender after he shoots Greedo. He says, "Sorry about the mess." Kind of like, and I think because, and I'll expand on that because it's really just kind of a little bit of like arrogance, but still doing the right thing. Kind of like I can see myself actually saying something like that, just like, "Hey, here's a 10. I'm sorry I knocked over that glass, but I got to go. So here's a $10 bill. I'm out of here." And so I think I think that's that kind of perspective. Because again, if you really overanalyze it, he did the right thing. He at least paid for the mess and he paid for his drink, but he's not going to deal with it, which I think kind of what I do sometimes. So
nice.
Hey, I'll admit it. I'm not perfect. Far from it. So, but.
And so ends the 10 questions. Now, what do you do on your show after you finish with the 10 questions?
I usually I say thank you for joining us, and where can you be found on social media? So,
could you do that?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram at ATGcast, and you can go to atgcast.com to keep up with all the different shows on the Around the Galaxy network.
Okay, enough of that. Thank me for being your guest.
Okay, well, hey, Dad, thanks for being my host tonight. This was great. I'd say, where can they find you on social media? But you're not on social media. You're on
I might be, but I wouldn't know.
All right. Well, next time you come down, I'll have to look at your phone and see if you're on Twitter.
Check my phone, see if I'm on social media. I could be.
You could be.
I could really pop up. What is it? I could be on your roof, or what was the title of your album that you did?
We might sit on your roof.
We might sit on your roof. Right?
I have to have Mike on the show sometime. I don't know if that would work.
You
out,
should.
but
Oh, that
we
would
should
be
definitely-
awesome.
yeah.
You should. You really should. When he's
But,
not out, well, I won't say that. But Mike's my friend. I want him to be my friend.
Oh man. So good.
Hey, did I ever tell you I play poker with a guy that looks just like Admiral Akbar?
You can't play with poker with a guy who looks like a fish.
He looks exactly
No.
like him, and
I
to me. And I want to call. I'm dying to call him Akbar, but I'm afraid even though he's 80 years old, he may know who I'm talking about.
An 80-year-old. Wait. It's never good to call somebody a fish face. That's not. I don't think that would be well received.
But he looks like Akbar. He does. He really does. The only you could almost see him with his eyes on the side of his head instead of on his head.
That's hard. Well, I think that your Halloween costume this year should be you should be Tusken Raider Boba Fett. You got the hair going on. I think you could pull it off. You could wear some robes, carry a gaffy stick. I think you could be Tusken Raider Boba Fett.
I think I could be Boba Fett's grandfather.
But that would mean Jango Fett's father. We don't know anything about that, so we'll have to.
Well, see, there you go. Now you've got an opportunity to create a backstory for a new character.
The Book of Jango Fett.
The Book of Jango Fett. That's what. But then Jango Fett is his grandfather?
No, Jango Fett is his father.
Is his father.
But then we would get to know his father as part of the story. And we'll how I don't know if it'd be very exciting. Django and his dad Wango throwing
Mungo
Fett and Django Fett playing catch in the backyard. I don't think that'd be very exciting.
Yeah, I want Jean-Luc Picard to play the part though. I think he would.
That could work.
That could work. Yeah.
Well, hey, this has been awesome. Thank you for.
It really has.
Thank you for giving me the week off for my 150th episode. It's great that you were able to do my job for the week, and I just had to sit here and make up. It sucks being a guest. It's hard. It's not easy.
It having been your guest, I agree.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap it up for this week.
We'd better before we have a big family argument.
Yeah, well, it's not easy being talked to by you.
Yeah.
You never understood me, Dad. All right. All right. Well, thank you. This has been a blast.
It really has. I had a lot of fun.
All right. Awesome. And
what do I do now?
I'm just gonna